Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily this beautiful Friday morning. I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf. And look who I have here. Look who's back and who's going to be partnering with me and us on this program.
Thank you so much, Maupe. And it's good to be back, as they say. My name is Neo Taigwe and welcome to the show.
Yes, Nyota, it's good to have you back. Good morning and welcome. I am Bukola Koka.
Back like you never left. How do they say it, right? Well,
Yes,
rise and shine this beautiful morning. Welcome to the show. I'm Kaido Kikili from here in Lagos.
Indeed. Today, Friday, the last day of the month of March.
Yes,
exciting. So we'll just go straight on into the papers and see what they have to say on this last day of the month of March. So we'll start out with Daily Trust. Opens up with Labour matter. Labour cautions FG on petrol subsidy removal. Interesting.
Subsidy removal is taking the front page.
That conversation, when would that conversation ever end?
Auntie, we've been on this for how long?
An unending conversation, as they say. Nigerians, and see that rider, Nigerians worry over unclear palliative plan. Cost of living to rise by 200%, that's according to experts. And now, who are these experts? Where have they been and how long have they been having this conversation? Then incoming administration must make refineries rail system work. That story continues on page 4, and if that happens, that might make it a lot easier when the subsidy eventually, honestly. And above that, we are just below the nameplate. Dangote lists 300 billion naira record bond on NGX. PDP reverses suspension of Ayim fire share Shema after Ayu's exit. Was Ayu the clog in the wheel of the reversal? Well,
we'll be asking the PDP.
That conversation that conversation's not over. Then come down below that picture of watermelons. Whoa. But I like to read. They said businesses pick up at fruit market in Zuba, Abuja as cash circulates. So I guess there's more cash in circulation now. So all the hue and cry about no money.
Well, I think that's Abuja. I mean, I think we have to be very specific about the location, about where the cash is circulating, because some people are still saying that they're yet to, see the cash. It's beginning to circulate gradually. I mean, the only feelers I have received are from Lagos and Abuja, and maybe those will not be very, very good measures. It's trickling down, in those two places. But what about the other states? Are they beginning to feel it?
Communities.
Indeed.
Let's find out what's going on in the rural, deep in the hinterland. How much are the people able to see on a daily basis? Then Nigeria's debt rose to 46.25 trillion naira in 2022. That's coming from the Debt Management Office. And below that, this one, name interim government plotters, CDD tells DSS. Police grill National Assembly officials over 500 million naira misappropriation, and VP-elect visits IBB. Well, that's it from Daily Trust.
Quite a lot to pour on Daily Trust this morning. But let's take a look at what Vanguard has for you on the front page. They also focus on the economy. Nasima, others list risks to economy as debt hits 46.3 trillion naira. Debt service falls 8.2% to 3.87 trillion naira. Debt stock within acceptable limits, that's according to DMO. Not too good for a developing economy, says Nasima. Rising debt undermines economic growth, that's according to analysts. So you want to flip to page 5 to see what it is that they're saying. The Shiites are still taking a part of the news, and they have a picture this morning, Shiites protesting here in Abuja. That's the picture there. And then look at this. PDP reverses suspension of Ayim, Fayose, Shema, others. That story is on page 9 of the paper. Other stories that might take your interest. My position against Naira redesign policy hurt my re-election bid. That's according to Matawale. So you find details on page 9 of the paper. I think that is if you're interested in the how. How did he? Because some would have thought that, okay, you went to court, you are trying to be seen on the side of the people. It meant that maybe you just might be able to scale through. Well, what happened? Page 9 is where you find details. Presidential poll, Obi disagrees with US APC over White House Park protest. It's on page 8 of the paper. Politics is still also very much on the front page. And Nigeria has highest malnutrition cases in Africa. So for all those who have been elected, re-elected, this is the work that you have to do. Nigeria has highest malnutrition cases in Africa. That's according to the federal government. And I also see NI. I don't know what that acronym means, but you might want to flip to page 27. Let's leave it there for Vanguard newspapers.
And flip very quickly to this Nigeria newspaper. It has quite a number of interesting stories for you, but let's start with the big one. PDP in dramatic voter farce reverses sanctions on Fayose, Ayim, others opt for reconciliation with aggrieved members. Of course, that conversation continues as we seek to understand what exactly is happening with the leadership crisis in the People's Democratic Party. But let's take a look at some other stories.
So they were desuspended or unsuspended or what? I mean, there's been so much going on in that space, and I'm glad we'll be taking a look at that this morning.
Well, what's the weight of their sins? That's, for me, the more important questions. Is it lesser than that of the now embattled and suspended national chairman of the party?
And is it even a sin in the first place? Sin is... You know what? Go ahead.
Well, I quite understand. It's a juicy one, Cardi. And we're diving into it right after this timeout. Right after the paper review.
Well, when you say juicy one, it's a very intriguing one, okay? It's not a juice I enjoy, really. But.
Okay. I like your choice of words. But take a look at this one. Nigeria's public debt rose to 46.25 trillion naira as at end of December 2022. That's according to the Debt Management Office. And, this is amid also the dwindling excess crude account as well. This is something that the incoming administration, of course, should look into. It has its work cut out for it. And there's more. FG blames state governments, charcoal dealers for massive deforestation. That's an interesting one. The conversation on, alternative sources of energy continues. And lastly, Ohaneze condemns sit-at-home order in Lagos, seeks OPC leaders' help. So there's a sit-at-home order in Lagos now.
Well, is it from government?
Certainly not from government. I think, this Biafra...
We need to properly contextualize it.
Simon Ekpa is fingered at the heart of this one.
Hey, people give orders in their homes, all sorts. So, hey, if it's not from the government, you know what to do with it. We'll take a look at the Guardian newspaper this morning, and it leads with, something quite interesting. Might be similar if you want. Obedience protests in U.S. help it distance itself from interim government plot. So this is one that has been trending as well, a major one. A host of riders, at least 8 riders to that story. You know what, I'll just let you do the reading yourself. But that's the lead for The Guardian this morning. And you see just on top of that big one, tech hitches mar UTME mock exams. So first it was the elections, the IRF, and now. But good one is this is mock exam. So is this like a pretest? What happens with the real one, or is this same? Well, more details should be on the inside pages of the Guardian newspaper this morning. A couple of more stories. Let me just mention this one. Aviation workers berate Sirika, vow to resist demolition of Lagos offices. Let's leave it there for the Guardian.
And that's it. That's it on the look at the papers. Some of the dailies today. Sunrise Daily will be back in a moment. We're good to go.
All right, let's get right into it. It's Friday, but if anything, for commuters across the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, tilling all the way back into Lagos, it's not been a very palatable week, really. And we're starting off with that this morning. And we're joined on the program by Engineer Omar Bakare, who is a Federal Controller of Works, Lagos, just to, shed light, speak on this rehabilitation work and the traffic gridlock which you may have experienced or someone you know. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on the program, sir. I'd just like to get right into it, really. I was in that traffic for, 5-6 hours just some days ago. A lot of other Nigerians, thousands, have experienced that traffic, and it's hellish. I'm sure you've gotten, reports of that, maybe even experienced it yourself. So spending 6 hours, really, it gives you that PTSD feel. So tell us, let's begin with this one. We know the route sees a lot of traffic normally, even without construction work. If you could give us a background, what kind of work, what kind of modelings did the Federal Ministry of Works do in partnership with the contractors to at least preempt what we're seeing right now? Because I like to believe that some work was done prior to when the construction started itself. So if you could just give us a background to this first.
Thank you very much. Prior to the recommencement of the construction works on Lagos-Ibadan Express around OPIC, let me, hello, are you there? Can
yes,
you hear me?
Please go ahead. We can hear you well.
First of all, I'd like you to know that our construction corridor for now is between 7 up, which is the beginning of the project, that's our 00, up to Long Bridge, that's the OPIC area. Presently, we're working on 3 locations there along the construction corridor. That's at the beginning, that's around 7 up. We're also working around Bega, that's inbound Lagos, and we're working at OPIC area, outbound Lagos. We have almost completed the inwards Lagos at OPIC area. Before we started recommend the work for OPIC area, some palliative works were carried out on the roads adjoining the express road itself. This is the road that is being used by the OPIC estate. This is to make sure that during the construction, for which we will need to do a diversion and reduce the capacity of the road in order for the contractor to be able to work, we carried out repair works for people to be able to have not much of an alternative, but addition to what we provided on the express. Before the construction work, before the repairs at all, the Lagos-Ibadan Express Road from Lagos to Shagamu has 3 lanes. This construction is to expand the road to add shoulders to the 3 lanes in and out. So at the end of the construction, we're going to have effectively 3 lanes and additional width for the inner and the outer shoulder, which will take the road to 4 lanes. Now, for us to carry out these repairs, this rehabilitation, reconstruction, and expansion work, we need to work on 2 lanes at a go. And in doing this, we usually extend the existing road by working on the non-existing shoulder to provide additional lane. While we're working on the inner lane, we have 2 lanes on the outside for motorists to use. When we work on the outer part of the road, we provide 2 lanes, which is about 7.5 meters on the inner lane. Well, we, over the time, have sent out messages, awareness campaign,
Right.
jingles through media, traffic radio, Bond FM, to inform people about the construction works going on. However, because of the volume of traffic on this road, we expect people to slow down around the construction area and to abide by traffic laws and to cooperate with controlling officers.
All right. Anthony Bakare, if I could just come in now. I mean, we understand that this has to be done, really. Our road infrastructure has to be improved. So we're coming from that background, knowing fully well that we need our roads if we want to do business, if we want to travel, and all of that. That's vital to development. But, you know, my question is just how much thought was put into this whole thing. We know that in other climes, and I imagine here too, there are queuing models that are used. So when the lanes are 3, this is average travel time. Let's say it takes 5 minutes between where 7-Up and the end of OPIC. Let's just imagine. But because of this construction that has made the lanes, I mean, limited it to just 2, I imagine that you've done a modeling of what average travel time will be. Maybe it will be 10 minutes or at least 20 minutes at the maximum. So that's the question I'm trying to ask, that were there thoughts put into this such that you know what to expect? And if it's taken beyond that, you know that, well, something is wrong, we need to put measures in place, maybe have traffic management put into place, maybe work extra hours or work midnight. And I think that's another point that has been raised. So were those things done? What was the average travel time that you projected for this construction? Because I imagine it wasn't 6 hours that you projected in all of the modelings that you did prior to this construction, and even the updates you've done from time to time.
Thank you very much. Well, ordinarily, our roads are designed for 100 kilometers an hour when you do not have encumbrances. That's the maximum. When we have a construction corridor, we do advise motorists to drive maximum 30 kilometers an hour, which means there can be situations that can make you go slower. But we'll never envisage situations that will make you stay in one position. But these do happen sometimes because of some occurrences like breakdowns, accidents, and sometimes attitude of motorists. Or when you drive 30 kilometers an hour, I will break it down for you. From 7-Up to Long Bridge is about 7 kilometers. When you drive 30 kilometers an hour, you will do roughly 30 divided by 4, that's
almost 8? That's almost 8?
You do like 15 minutes, from 7-Up to Long Bridge, like 15 minutes. That's what you're supposed to do. If you do half of that, that is 15 kilometers per hour, you do 30 minutes max. People who are used to driving even above design speed of 100 kilometers do not find this funny. They do not find it acceptable. That's why you see them going out of the provided lanes, sometimes trying to outsmart, and in some extreme cases, they go to the oncoming lane to face the traffic. When we have this situation, it causes this traffic gridlock. We work with relevant agencies in this respect. We work with the police, we work with Federal Safety Corps, we work with LASMA on Lagos side, we work with Chris on Ogun side. they are always on the road working with us. I must confess, sometimes they are overwhelmed by the attitude of these motorists. And you will agree with me that the volume of traffic on that road is great. So sometimes we're just caught in this gridlock way. Anytime it happens, we do our best to get it resolved, and that's the way we've been walking on the road. There has never been any time that we did not give due consideration to all these happenings. But sometimes, like you mentioned earlier, we get ourselves caught and people spend longer time than they normally should spend on the road.
Well, Mr. Umar, I doubt that commuters on that road will agree with you that traffic on the road is great at any given time. But yesterday's traffic was pretty much attributed to an accident at the OPIC turning. So the question is, why is your partnership with other agencies, security agencies and traffic management agencies, why is it yielding very little results if indeed you're collaborating to ensure that if there's any incident on the road, it is managed such that commuters can still have a good time riding on the road? Because yesterday, productive man hours was pretty much lost.
Could you quickly take that again?
Okay, I started by saying that commuters
Could you please take a minute?
Are you with me now, sir, Mr. Umar? Can you hear me?
Yes, I am with you.
Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, I started by saying that commuters will hardly agree with you that traffic on that road at any given time is great. But yesterday's traffic was attributed to an accident that occurred somewhere around the OPIC turning. So if indeed you're in collaboration with security and traffic management agencies, why is response time so slow such that productive man hours are totally lost on Lagos-Ibadan Expressway whenever such an incident occurs?
Thank you. Response time when we have accident or breakdown is supposed to be very swift. Sometimes, because of the gridlock, which mostly is caused by the attitude of some motorists, not all of them, it makes it difficult for the team. We have a standby team that is sole responsibility is to remove broken down vehicles or vehicles that are involved in accident. Immediately, almost immediately it occurs. But sometimes it takes time to get to the actual location of the accident. We are in synergy with all these agencies I earlier mentioned. We have a group chat with which we give out information to all the stakeholders on the group chat: the police, Federal Road Safety, LASMA, and TRACE. We all work together. Meanwhile, you've got to realize one thing: we work for different agencies, and we have different calls to duty. Even though we're all working for government, we report to different commands. Sometimes we do not get it right immediately. Sometimes. Most times we work together and we respond together when we have issues on the road. Meanwhile, I want to talk on the general operations on the road itself. We need to realize and accept the fact that for us to carry out this construction, people need to cooperate with us, especially in the way and manner the provided lanes on the road are being used. This is mostly where we have issues. The contractor does not work haphazardly. They partition the area where they're going to work and they stay within that area. They make provision for motorists to use the road, but at a certain reduced speed. This day, the contractor is working from morning till night in order to be able to achieve and complete and deliver this project in good time. We've been discussing with the contractor about night work. Of course, the issue of security is one of the things we're looking at critically. Recently, the contractor has agreed to work late into the night, though not overnight. In the past week, they have been working, and this week also, they have been working up till 9 p.m. in some of the locations where we're working now. Even at that, there have been complaints of safety as people just cross the road and move in the areas of construction. It's very difficult to control these people who just cross the barrier on foot, not even vehicles this time, and they are exposed to danger as we work with moving equipment all the time. The people that are there working are well geared up. They're protected. They wear safety boots, they wear safety helmets, they wear gloves, and some other safety devices. The people that cross the road and come close to this equipment do not have anything to protect them, and they are very, very difficult to control.
Mr. Bakri, if I may come in here, the rehabilitation of this road, one would believe that is being done for the good of the road users in Nigeria. And if that's the case, would you say that the road users are enjoying the work that's going on? How much of information do they have in terms of alternative routes that have been provided? Because you talked about the contractor having done this, ensure that there's accessibility provided for the people. How much of information is out there for the road users to know that at this particular time, this is the route to take. At this particular time, that's the route to take.
Thank you. Like I said earlier, before we recommenced work this quarter, at the beginning of this year, we engaged some radio stations like Traffic Radio, Bond FM, to make announcements all the time about our activities on the road. I must tell you, there are not so many alternative roads close to the Lagos-Ibadan Express around where we're walking now. Even within Lagos, where you have alternative routes, that's around Bega area, where motorists could go through Ojoju, where they could enter Omole, bust out at Magodo and all that, is still not enough, like I said, considering the volume of traffic. The motorists, I must tell you, are quite aware of the fact that construction work is ongoing. And we cannot give information that is not necessary because there are no close alternative routes to Lagos, Ibadan, around where we're working, except for these intersections that lead to state routes around these areas I've earlier mentioned, except for some people that may choose to go through Shagamu, Ikorodu, into Ojota into Corridor Road. Some of them still find Lagos-Ibadan a quicker route to take, especially the trucks, because of the smoothness of the road coming from Ibadan up to the Long Bridge. They prefer to still come on Lagos-Ibadan. People are quite well aware of the activities going on the road.
So indeed, people might be aware of the activities, going on the road. I'm just wondering, do you have a mechanism for feedback? Because yes, your part is to do the construction and make sure that the road is fit for users. But I also imagine that you're partnering with other stakeholders, such as security agencies and traffic management authorities, both the FRSA and Lagos and Ogun State traffic management agencies. The question for me will be, how do you get feedback as to how users of that particular road are finding it? Do you have any way of knowing what the experience has been since you started construction?
Yes, we do. All the stakeholders along the construction corridor, especially around OPIC, we have residential estates there, and we have some industries around the place. We have a platform through which we relate all the time, and they give us feedbacks. A couple of times we have engaged the road users with the press people. They have, from time to time, given their concerns, and they have given their complaints as well on the way things have been on the road. Or we get feedback.
All right, let's wind down now quickly. When is this work going to be completed? If you can hear me, when will this work be done?
Yeah,
Please go ahead. We can hear you.
The first phase of the project, which is for us to deliver from 7 up, which is the 00, for section 1 of the project, up to Shagamu interchange, to deliver the main carriageway from 7 up to Shagamu. We had earlier promised to deliver by the end of this quarter, but we did not envisage the fuel shortage issue that affected the progress of work, the cash swap issue that affected the progress of work at some point. This time around, we're looking at end of April, give or take, amongst other things, like the weather. The weather is quite fair to us as at this time, though there have been a couple of rains.
Right.
But by the time the rains come in, it will be very difficult to do some aspect of the work.
All right. And can your men work overnight? That has been suggested as well, quickly.
Yes, they can work overnight, given the safety is properly in place. And I must tell you, we're working on that. We're doing a trial on it already by working beyond our normal closing time of 6 p.m. and working up to 9 p.m. right now.
All right. We expect that this will be done smoothly, and the commuters can heave a sigh of relief. Thank you so much for your time and shedding some light on this. We'll be speaking to you clearly in the coming days if there's a need for it. Engineer Omar Bakare is the Federal Controller of Works, Lagos. Wish you the very best in this work.
Thank you very much. God bless.
Well, you've heard that, so if you're on that route, at least you can look forward to April. We'll take a quick break now. When we return, we'll pay attention to another issue that affects, in fact, the whole nation. That's in a moment. Stay with us.
The Minister of Labour and Employment arrives at the State House hours before a planned picketing of the branches of the Central Bank of Nigeria across the Federation by the Nigeria Labour Congress to give updates on the recent happenings at the 68th Ministerial Weekly Briefing. The leadership of the NLC had earlier given the federal government a 7-day ultimatum to end the cash scarcity or face a nationwide protest by Wednesday, March 29.
We told the CBN what to do, and they did exactly what we asked them to do. Engage them, and they did. They, NLC, affirmed that there is an improvement in the cash flow. They praised the CBN at our last meeting yesterday and told them to improve. I'm optimistic they will not strike because we have apprehended, like I told you.
The minister responds to questions about the ministry's slow response to crisis situations.
We have conciliated about 4,000 labor disputes. More than, I think, 4,300 something since I came to that ministry. And you don't hear about them. We have what we call rapid response, especially in oil and gas. Rapid response, because we know the implication.
He also speaks on palliatives after fuel subsidy is halted by June.
It is left for the incoming government to take it or leave it and address the issue as as best as they deem fit. But definitely, like I told you, we're already handling some of the envisaged challenges. We are handling the issue of pay rise. I say all MDAs are doing that. Even for federal civil servants.
The minister affirms that 19 job centers offering various services have been established across the 6 geopolitical zones as part of the government's efforts to strengthen production self-sufficiency and skill development. But perhaps the real concern lies in private sector involvement, how to upscale unemployment rate since it's quadrupled in 2015 and 2020 recession. From the presidential villa, Gloria Umezuki, Channels Television News.
Well, yes, that is our focus right now. It affects you and I, really. So, I mean, let's get deep into this one. As you've seen there, we're joined by Comrade Joe Ajero, who is the president of the Nigeria Labour Congress. He joins us virtually from the nation's capital this morning. Good morning, Comrade Ajero. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Good morning.
Well, a lot of Nigerians were looking forward to that date and to see what was going to happen. But just in the nick of time, Labour says, well, we're suspending this. That's a term used usually. We're suspending this for 2 weeks to watch how the cash flows. Maybe that's why it's called liquid anyway. See if it flows well, and then we'll make a decision on that one. And give us a benefit of behind the scenes. What were the issues discussed? What were the compromises that Labour had to reach? What was presented to you by the federal government? I know you had that meeting with the CBN and the Minister of Labour as well. So what kind of assurances did you get?
Well, what happened wasn't a matter of assurances or compromises. The NLC was clear. We first gave a 1-week ultimatum, and the federal government did not respond to it. We now met at a neck level and gave a further ultimatum of another 1 week. On the basis of that, the CBN rushed to our office the following day, and we gave them, what we want, direct, in unambiguous terms, that, look, every Nigerian should be able to access his cash. You must work on Saturdays and Sundays to ease off this cash crunch before Wednesday, when our ultimatum will expire. And they gave us their commitment that they were going to do that on a daily basis, they were going to push out what they were either pushing out every week. And we monitored it along with them, until the following Wednesday. Through our people, in the whole states of the Federation, in the villages, in the towns. And the report we got was, a substantial improvement. People could now go to bank and access their money. And that was what we needed, because we were clear to them that we don't want to look at the so-called statistics of how many billion you are pushing out. Our interest is on whether the common man has been able to access his money. And when we got a certain percentage, and we called our next meeting again and collected reports from all the states of the Federation, and it was substantial, the compliance was substantial. And we said, okay, we should, so that we don't burn our fingers, let's take another 2 weeks to watch whether the compliance will be sustainable. And that was exactly what happened. And we're on it now. On a daily basis, our people are moving around for the next 2 weeks. But let me say it here. The essence of giving an ultimatum is to ensure that you are giving the management or the employer the opportunity to respond, and to satisfy the conditions. And if the conditions are satisfied, there's no need, with such an action. So that's where we are.
Okay, so you're saying that before that meeting you had with the CBN and the Minister of Labour on Monday, CBN had come to you before that, because it was just before the weekend last week that the announcement was given that banks should work Saturdays and Sundays. So are you saying that the CBN had met with you last week before Monday's meeting?
Exactly. CBN had a meeting with us in my office. They came to my office, and we gave them, our position straight. Operate weekends, summon commercial banks. And they promised that we are going to meet commercial banks that same evening.
Right.
They left my office. And then they worked throughout the weekend. The meeting with the Minister of Labour, in fact, at the meeting, I tried to find out, from the minister, that is this really conciliatory meeting? And he said without prejudice that the parties involved are free to be. I said we have met, and this is where we are. It's only our neck that will call off action. Probably the Minister of Labour were doing their job statutorily. But before that time, the cash crunch has eased off. The CBN had taken our position, and they had implemented it.
So as things stand right now, Comrade, you're saying that you are satisfied with the level of cash flow, because you said that, the percentage looks favorable to you, but you watch to see if it is sustained. So right now, are you content, satisfied with the cash flow?
As far as our members are concerned nationwide, they are satisfied with minimum doubt, which we want to clear within the next 2 weeks. They are satisfied, maybe banks are not the same. Some of the banks are doing relatively better than others. So we want to monitor the activities of some of the banks who I may not want to mention here so that I don't demarcate them. So those are some of the points that we have now.
Let's put satisfaction in proper context, Comrade Ajeru. We read in the papers today that the situation had improved in Abuja, but amid the cash crunch, some of the lessons learned from this Naira scarcity was that banking infrastructure is pretty much lacking, particularly in rural areas and the hinterland parts of Nigeria. So what are the findings from your National Economic Council, particularly from those areas, in terms of how liquid Nigerians have become following your intervention and the CBN and the federal government's appeal?
Well, there's a little difference between our intervention, and the policies of CBN in terms of banking in rural areas. These are two different things, and those are issues you can't resolve in a day. Prior to this cash crunch, we are not concerned with how they are citing banks in rural areas in some communities. Yes, you are right. There are areas, especially in the rural areas, that you don't even have a bank, that people have to travel. In fact, in some local governments, you may see one bank or the other. Those are things that take a process, if actually that is what a country needs, that is what the banks need. We need to go into them differently But on this issue of cash crunch, and the effects that it was having on the economy, CBN was like the alpha and omega, almost all facets. The governors had their position, the Apex Bank had their position and all that. And we were at a point that, we had to take a firm decision, and that was exactly what happened. So our people monitoring in those areas will not definitely manufacture banks where they don't exist. They were equally monitoring the existing banks and how they have been performing, given the environment they operate in. So that's exactly the situation. And we hope that by the end of next week, we should collect their reports moving forward.
Well, the Labour Minister has been quoted as saying that by virtue of Section 7, I believe, .8 of the Trade Dispute Act, once he or she initiates conciliation, that Labour has to maintain status quo on its line of action. This is regardless of whether you are satisfied or not following an intervention. In this case now, the Naira scarcity and the directive given to CBN to release cash. So what if you are not satisfied? Wouldn't you be incapacitated by this portion of the Trade Dispute Act to take a legitimate course of action in response to your dissatisfaction?
I don't think so. The provision of the Section 7 of the Trade Dispute Act is that if he invites us to a meeting, we will be there to state our position clearly. It is not an act that will tie our hands. And he knows that there are occasions that we have attended meetings. And if no agreement is reached, which is, collectively agreed, joint authorship of agreement, we will not, be bound by such. So even in the meeting we called, that meeting produced no agreement. We didn't have any agreement. Conciliation could be, just to consult the parties on the way forward. That is clear. And one of the weak points of the Ministry of Labour is that they don't have some binding effect in their activities. Go through the law. In some of the even agreements we have in employers or employees, if they don't obey it, the Ministry of Labour, by the act, unless it's amended, is seen as almost a toothless bulldog. If they don't abide any of the parties, the Ministry of Labour hires will be to refer the case to either arbitration or to industrial court. So that is it. It's not like that this section compels Labour, that they must. Yes, we have to answer him. We have to be there. We have to state our case based on their intervention. But I say that if the intervention is not satisfactory to the parties, then every party goes their way. And this is not the first time, this is not the second time where meetings were held and actions continue. I can tell you how many meetings they had with us, and then action continues. So both parties, especially through a consensus, must agree, and an agreement is produced.
Okay, let me bring in this issue. I know that, we're still talking Naira scarcity, and, you also say that it does appear that there is some reprieve coming the way of workers. But even as workers try, still struggling to see if they can lay their hands on this very rare commodity now, I also know that they're also grappling with another issue, the issue of inflation, which is running away with the wind. And it does appear that the 30,000 Naira minimum wage, which was last negotiated, no longer cuts it. So I'm wondering, are you also having another discussion with the federal government on an increase in minimum wage?
I think the old minimum wage, cannot sustain anybody, even with what is happening. A lot of problems, Naira scarcity, and at the peak of that Naira scarcity, you discover that if you need 10,000, you have to part with 3,000. And the wage of the worker came back to about 21,000. And the same thing with the issue of price of fuel, electricity tariff, cost of transportation, essential commodities in the market, other domestic products. So the wage of the worker was just eroded, as soon as that 30,000 naira minimum wage, was announced. But we had a challenge, of having maybe 4 or 5 years, reopener clause in the negotiation of the minimum wage, which we are getting ready now to go into. But I listened to the minister when he was talking about deregulation and wage review. The two are not related, and it's better we make it clear. If we must go into a cost of living analysis on our wage situation, then we should be thinking of something else. But if the federal government is thinking of wage award, like the Dodger Award, that would be highly welcome, at least to cushion the effects of what is happening now. Ordinarily, by now, the federal government would have done that in consultation with the unions, NLC, TUC. But as of today, there is no such. We have been hearing political statements on their intention, and we want them to, put this into reality. That's the way we are. That's where we are standing as of today, as at this moment.
Well, I do know that this conversation started sometime last year, and it was the federal government that started it. I think the federal government was making plans to review the minimum wage. It was the Minister for Labor, Dr. Chris Ngige, who actually brought up this conversation sometime in September last year. So I'm wondering, because you have said that you are, held back because you have a 5-year reopener clause, beg your pardon. So I'm wondering, how do you think this is going to happen? Since right now, the conversation is also coming up in the light of an imminent removal of fuel subsidy. People are wondering how that is going to, pan out. And also the fact that inflation, is still something that people are still struggling with. So I'm just wondering, how do you intend to get round that? Do you intend to seek clarification from the federal government as to, what exactly they're thinking about with this wage increase?
Well, I think I wouldn't know, because he didn't come out with, what they have in mind. Ordinarily, as we are moving towards the expiration of existing agreements, we should be meeting by now. Series of meetings. At times it may take 6 months, it may take 5 months, it may take more, in engagement, so that we can arrive on something. If that is what he's talking of, and he made that intention known by September, and up to now, the committees have not been inaugurated. Because if they inaugurate a committee for wage review, everyone in this country will know about it. Channels will equally report it. I don't think there's anyone in existence now. But there is pressure equally from our side, on the need, for a kind of wage award, to make sure that people survive this harsh economic situation, which you have mentioned, caused by inflation. And like I told you, this inflation, is almost, met by the actions and inactions of the Nigerian state. You can look at the issue of increase in tariff of electricity, which is dependent on inflation. And you and I know that each time you increase that same tariff, it will equally lead to inflation. And it's a reoccurring decimal. So some of their actions and inactions, cause this inflation. And then we'll have to look at a shock observer that will take care of this inflation each time it comes. But I don't want to talk about the issue of deregulation, because for some time now, you see in the pages of newspaper, they are telling you they will deregulate, they will do this, they will do that. The NLC will not join issues with them, until they do that their plan. We are holding our plan to our chest. We don't want to go into that inglorious debate, of organizations and bodies and ministries that are all ingenious. They'll be talking of one item deregulation for the past 10, 15 years.
Okay. Mr. Ajero, if I may interrupt you, Mr. Ajero, there are those who are concerned about the Nigerian Labour Congress and how your agitations appear to be staccato, more or less like one issue after the other. Some are thinking that shouldn't the Labour Congress be thinking of seeking and pushing for establishment of institutions, so to speak, where it's not like every 2-3 years, every 1 year, every 6 months, the Labour Congress is coming out to protest, but the Labour Congress is holding the government and leadership accountable consistently, not like today we are pushing for this, tomorrow we are pushing for that. Can't we push for establishment of institutions that would last, for instance?
Institution, like I did. What do you mean by institution? Because so that we can understand it clearer.
Let's look at for instance, let's look at the issue of corruption. For instance, the EFCC is there, but we could continue to hear about corrupt politicians, corrupt leaders who appear to get away with one thing or the other. After maybe 3-4 years of prosecution, the case just fizzles out. Has the NLC ever thought about, pushing for the proper prosecution of this case to a conclusive end? Has the NLC ever thought about going on strike to see that these people are punished as they should be for depriving the nation or the people of their resources?
The laws of this land makes almost any of those accused to be innocent, until the court finds them, guilty. So the NLC will not preempt, what the courts are supposed to do. But even in all these institutions, the NLC is not represented at any stage. So they wouldn't know what is happening in some of these institutions. We mentioned the EFCC, maybe the ICPC and whatever. The NLC will not interfere with their work. They have been given the appropriate legal backing. The administrative organs of all these other areas, are to work to the end. While NLC concerns itself with the responsibility. But in instances where probably the court or the legislative organs discover that they have outlived their usefulness, the government that appointed them knows what to do. Because I don't want to give the NLC, more jobs than is given to them by our principals, and our principals are the workers. If at the next meeting of the NLC, certain decisions are reached, and we agree that that we should take ABCD action, we will do that. But we will not like to be manipulated by politicians, one against the other. Oh, this person is a corrupt person, you should go and protest against him. That is why, that area we are not moving into. However, if we have an insight on what is happening in those areas, or assuming our members sit at the board of such organizations, they should be able to brief us on what is happening, and we'll be able to take a current position. If you are looking at even the issue of corruption, have we looked at the level of unemployment and underemployment that is taking place? Have we looked at governors that owe salaries for 20 months, 30 months that are not paid, which are left for the NLC alone to fight? These institutions we are talking of, when workers' salaries are diverted, does the ICPC and the EFCC go and query such governors and others? So those are institutions, and they are serving the purpose, which they were set for.
Right. Comrade Ajeru, we're winding down now, and I just want to wind down on this note. In about 2 months or so, Nigerians will be seeing a new administration. You had said, you had a conversation with Mark by saying that the Labour Union owns the Labour Party or the Labour Party movement. The candidate of the Labour Party did not win in this election. How is the Labour movement, Labour unions, gearing towards this new administration? What are your expectations? Would you be working actively together with this coming government?
Well, the matter of whether the candidate of the Labour Party won or not is left for the cause now. They are going to the stage of the cause. So we do our job. Even if the Labour Party candidate had won the election, the NLC position will not change on issues fundamentally. On issue of deregulation, on issue of wage of workers, we've been able to draw a line between, how we function as NLC and how the Labour Party, formed by the NLC, should operate. So anybody, any administration that, extends their hands of fellowship, we will work with them, we will maintain our position, because ours is a kind of worker-centristic administration. So all those issues that affect the workers and the Nigerian masses will be pursued vigorously by the NLC, notwithstanding, the people in government. So that's our position, that's our mantra, and we'll have the workers' charter of demand, which we are pursuing, which as presidential candidates, whether APC or Labour Party, we handed over the workers' charter of demand to them. So we are going to pursue it and work with them. Right. But if they decide not to work with us, so be it.
Well, I'd like to thank you so much for your time, Comrade Joe Ajero, President of the Nigeria Labour Congress. Clearly, we'll be speaking with you again in like a week when that ultimatum ends to get an update. But thank you so much in the meantime.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's a look at Labour martyrs, but we're switching gears now. And you want to wait for this. Stay with us.
And there, welcome back. Sunrise continues. This time we're looking at the state of the nation. Recently, there was a press release by the Department of State Security talking about plots for interim government and calling it a misguided political actors. That will be our focus this time. And we have joining us in the studio here Professor Oke Ikechukwu, the Executive Director, Development Specs Academy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Also joining us is Kunle Adegoke, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Principal Partner, Kunle Adegoke & Co., who joins us via Zoom. Mr. Adegoke, okay, he's yet to come in. But let's start with you, Professor Ikechukwu. This, first of all, how would you say, after the elections, Nigeria, the state of the nation has been?
No, I think the elections, despite issues being raised, gives clear evidence of progressive political maturity of the more Nigerians. Elections held, more people came out voluntarily. Then after the elections, even those who were not satisfied with the outcome did not riot.
those they voted for, who lost or who won, did not create any untidy scene. Which is not to say everybody was satisfied, but what happens in a democracy, you recognize free choice, and that means you're ready to accept the outcome. So what I see is progressive gains, whereas there are episodic issues, which in themselves can never be avoided in any environment. So all things considered, events leading up to the election itself, we had assurances from INEC. Those assurances were met in substantial measure. But the truth of the matter also is that I have a substantial number of Nigerians who were not satisfied. Did they kill anybody? No. Did they go on the streets? No. Are they ready to follow the process? This is the second leg of the game, namely the recognition, because no matter how you feel about it, no matter the recorded and clear cases where people felt the judiciary didn't do very well in the past, one truth we can't run away from is that the judiciary is part of the democratic process in a modern state. And so people have said we're going to court. So on the whole, clearly there were lapses. Obvious, conspicuous lapses, videos showing such things. Unfortunately, we are hearing about arrests. A nation does not develop because it gets anything perfect. As a child is walking, is tumbling. We are seeing it. But when a child is perpetually stumbling, we'll say this child is retarded. And then we get worried. So let's see what follows through from this. We've seen declarations of results at all levels, local government, state assembly, governors, House of Reps, senators, and the presidency. The judiciary will be very busy in the next couple of weeks and probably months.
It's interesting the way you put it, progressive gains from in the area of democracy and all that. But what role how do you think the judiciary has played prior to the elections, during the elections, and you've even mentioned in there what they're going to do after the elections? How would you rate the judiciary? You've talked about security, the fact that there are some arrests that have been made already. You've talked about administrative side, how INEC has managed its entire system, so to speak, promises made, some met, some not met. But what do you think the judiciary is likely to do in the face of all of this?
The first point is to note that, when we speak of government, mentally we're thinking of the executive arm, which is incorrect, which is wrong. It's the other arm of government in addition to the judiciary. Now, the judiciary as an institution, in the recent past, we've had judgments which a lot of people felt could or shouldn't have gone the way it did. But the truth of the matter is that whereas some of the details may not be available to us, perception is a critical success factor in public administration. On the whole, the judiciary as an institution is different from the decisions and actions of specific members of the judiciary. But when those members of the judiciary are people who stand at a certain level, it colors the general perception of the judiciary. And that's where the problem seems to be coming from. But as it is, panels, tribunals have been set up. What we expect is that already, given the murky waters in which we stand after the elections, it is hoped that the judiciary will give some credibility, some further hope to Nigerians by turning out judgments that, based on the evidence before it, will also correspond with what a lot of people feel goes in line with natural justice, equity, and good conscience. So judiciary is on trial. INEC has been on trial for the last more than 1 year. People expect, for instance, didn't expect most of what I saw in the elections. INEC is not looking very good right now, and in many cases justifiably. But that's a matter that the courts will now finally determine that, okay, we've seen all of it, we've had all of it, these are the facts before us, this decision will come with. Already some people are making preemptive submissions. Oh, since in case A and B in the past, the judiciary took this kind of position, we're not sure we can feel confident that it will be fair now. We'll let it happen. We'll see it happen. Nations develop that way. And those who want change must develop the mindset of, a revolution doesn't occur because you're excited. Cuba, the strong man in Cuba, what's his name?
Fidel Castro.
Castro. In the end, he went on until his entire people were wiped out. There were none of them left. It is resilience that leads to change and not excitement. There's something I believe in. There's something I want to pursue. I'm pursuing it with all means available to me and without apologies. It is that kind of concept. And the youths also have gained. You recall there was a young boy, I really say boy because of his age, who committed suicide because of the elections. His candidate didn't win. And they say, oh, see what INEC has done to him. No, he was killed by Nigeria. Poor parenting, poor community life, collapsed values, wrong mentors, etc. Even at the religious level, I don't think anybody, while we're growing up, will have thought of that. So what we have is general collapse around us. But you can see the progressive cohesion of the youths. Imagine that this election took place immediately after NSAS. There will have been riots all over this country, for and against. But it's not happening. So you are reining in more and more people onto the platform of rationality. They're also beginning to see the extent, how deep-rooted or deep-seated the issues they're trying to deal with. Look, there are people who don't want this. We want it. But if we jump on the street and they jump, there'll be no nation at all to talk about. So those are the kind of games, subtle, but those are the kind of games I'm talking about. And that's why resilience will be a stronger component going forward than, rabble-rousing.
Indeed, Dr. Okeke-Chukwu, it's very interesting in that, I beg your pardon, Professor.
Your own. just call Okeke.
It is interesting how you paint this as part of the stops in our journey to nation building, and how all of this forms the tapestry of what eventually makes our country Nigeria. It's interesting you also say that when a child stumbles too much, they might begin to wonder if that child is retarded. I'll come back and ask you if you think that we're stumbling too much, and maybe that will provide Nigerians the answers. But let me quickly bring in the other guest, which was introduced, our other guest who was introduced earlier, Mr. Kunle Adegoke. He's a senior advocate of Nigeria and also principal partner, Kunle Adegoke & Co. He joins us via Zoom. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Mr. Adegoke. I'm sure that you have been taking a look and trying to perhaps decompress all that has happened before, during, and after the elections, particularly the presidential and governorship elections, and perhaps distilling into nuggets what lessons that we can learn and how it is that we should handle the very delicate situation that we found ourselves in. People who are discontent, pockets of protests here and there, and also this very, very interesting statement released by the Department for State Services about a plot for interim government, which they say is by misguided political actors. What are your thoughts on what has happened so far and this statement released by the DSS?
Thank you very much. I believe that the developments that we have had in the past few weeks are part of a democratic process. However, there is a limit to which certain things can be counted as part of a democratic process. And when you have an election all over the world, no election has been rated to be 100% good. There are people that will not be satisfied. There are those that will be joyous as a result of the process favoring their candidates or for some other reasons. However, where the electoral process has been concluded and a winner has emerged, a loser or losers have emerged, the next phase, as recognized by the Constitution of Nigeria, is that the battlefield will now move from the polling units, from the wards, now to the courts, where the judiciary will have the opportunity to look at the merits and demerits of the cases being presented. Right now, we have had judicial panels already in place. Election petition tribunals already in place all over Nigeria, in all states, and also at the federal level. The tribunal is already ready at the Court of Appeal to sit with respect to the presidential election petition. And we have quite a number, I think probably up to about 5 now, have been filed as petitions to determine the actual winner of the presidential election. At this particular stage, I will commend the parties for adopting what is regarded as constitutional, as democratic, that is, moving their grievances to the law courts. No nation will survive in a state of autarky, in a state of lawlessness, in a state of crisis. And the best we can do in the circumstance is now to go to court for anybody who is not satisfied with the outcome of the election. Now the parties have moved to the tribunals. The next thing is to allow the process to take its course. Yes, their lawyers should be ready to do their work. I'm involved in a number of petitions. And what I've been working on is to ensure that, yes, we are properly ready and prepared for all issues as may be coming up for the tribunals to determine. But a situation where protests are being organized, rallies are being organized after the election, we may see it as part of a democratic process, but no, it is going beyond what is recognized. Once you have filed your petitions in court, once you have moved your battlefield to the tribunal, then allow the judicial process to take its course. Prepare your lawyers, prepare your cases, arm them very well so that they will be able to persuade the tribunal to get judgment in your favor. It will not be part of a democratic process to now say that we will continue protesting until the inauguration or threatening fire and brimstone that the inauguration of the new president will not hold. No, that will not be part of the democratic process. I listened to Dati Baba Ahmed on channels, I think about a day or two ago, where he was threatening fire and brimstone, threatening to bring down the nation. No, that is not the hallmark of a democratic individual. He was involved in an election in 2011 when he went to the Senate. And the opponent did not threaten fire and brimstone, did not threaten to bring the senatorial district or the nation into jeopardy as a result of the decision of the electorates, which the opposition to his candidature believed that it actually won. It moved to the tribunal. And at the end of the day, after about 10 months, it was decided that the opposition actually won the election. That's Baba Ahmed had to vacate the seat. And if that should be the case, I believe that not only PDP, Labour Party, AA Action Alliance, and about 2 other parties have gone to the tribunal now. They have done the best. They have done what is commendable. Yes, you put the judiciary on its toes.
Mr. Adegoke, some people will say that you know, while you might argue that it's not a part of the democratic process. In other words, maybe protests are not a part of elections. But some people will say it is part of the rights recognized within a democracy, a right to freedom of speech, right to be able to express oneself freely, right of association, right to be able to protest if you feel, disenchanted by whatever it is that is happening. Are these rights all of a sudden abridged as a result of, it being involved in an electoral process?
That is not the case. What we are saying here is that where you are considering rights as guaranteed by the law, no right is absolute. Where my right begins is where your own ends. I cannot threaten that I will continue protesting on the streets, organizing rallies, which will be infringing on the economic rights of others, which will equally be threatening the democratic rights of other people. By the time you are saying you are organizing rallies, you are organizing protests and what have you, there is no way you will not inhibit free flow of traffic. By the time you are threatening institutions converging on their premises, maybe National Assembly or wherever, you are making it impossible for such institutions to freely and quietly do their duties. You'll be infringing on the rights of other Nigerians, assuming in a situation where there is a margin of appreciation, where there is no room for sufficient remedies, or there is no room for avenues by which you can seek remedies to your grievances, and you're organizing rallies, you're organizing protests, is a different thing. But where you have gone to court, yes, you have the right to protest, but you cannot have a right to protest in perpetuity until a date you choose that, okay, until they listen to you. I've heard people saying that until maybe a particular candidate is sworn in as president, they will not terminate the protest. I do not think that will form part of a democratic process. We just have to be reasonable here. Assuming the supporters of other candidates too are organizing protests, and we have probably millions of people on the roads on a daily basis, how do you think the nation is going to move forward? How do you think we are going to prosper? How do you think that the system is going to work in your favor, in my favor, in favor of everybody? And that is why I'm saying that, yes, I'm an advocate of the fundamental rights. I'm an advocate of democratic rights, because the two may not necessarily coincide. Yes, Because when you look at it, yes, fundamental rights are guaranteed under the Constitution. They are not absolute too. The Constitution does not make them to be absolute and unbreachable in any circumstance.
Right.
Where it will be infringing the laws of the land in certain respects, then the law will as well.
All right, Mr. Adegoke, let me take this to Professor Okechukwu now. And I mean, my focus would follow from what Mr. Adegoke said, trying to strike a balance between protecting democracy and not stifling free speech, not stifling dissenting voices, because that's actually a major part of democracy. And this is for Professor Okechukwu in our Abuja studio. So what kind of posturing then do you expect, or should we be expecting to have from both parties for Professor Okechukwu? So I'm talking about the government, which is in charge of the institutions, maybe the winners in the election as well. What kind of posturing do you expect from them? What kind of messaging do you expect from them? And for those who feel aggrieved too, what kind of posturing messaging do you expect from them, such that we strike that delicate balance between protecting democracy and not stifling free speech, not stifling protests, lawful protests, or peaceful protests, as the case may be? Prof.
Yeah, in all social action, the actors must be informed. You speak of free speech, correct, but there's also the law against libel. So your right to speak freely does not allow you to defame me. Then protests, yes, peaceful protests to make a point, but let's disaggregate the variables here and see whether there are justifications. Then I'll move on to the role of the players. The case some people have against the outcome of some of the elections, the cases are already in court. They have lawyers duly, retained, very competent legal luminaries. They've prepared their cases. They've made the submissions in court. The processes are being, analyzed for commencement and the rest of it. Then probably all of us in the studio here support a particular candidate, and then we go to picket the court. Rioting, not rioting actually, making a protest that, no, we've come to make this point. My question will then be, why did you hire lawyers? And as the senior advocate said, if every other person comes to the same court, what will happen? It will be chaos. But so let's get the point clear. Number one, group discipline must be restored. When you go to picket the court, you say you keep protesting. First, you're trying to overawe and intimidate the judiciary. That's the truth of the matter. You're saying that the courts should not sit at all, but they should listen to you and take a decision based on that. Will not take us anywhere. That's the point that needs to be made about that. So that you see that the right to protest is okay. You can use any kind of medium, but to surround an institution of state that has a task to carry out, in itself, that's even trespass. There are places, you have not Eagle Square now, the one near the Hilton in Abuja, where you can, that's where you actually allow, yes, the Unity Fountain. So discipline must be restored. So these people should rein in their followers, rein in their members, explain to them if they've not done so already that, look, this matter is in court. Lawyers are there. And remember that all the people protesting, they didn't come from one location. What you should then do is, are there no people managing the various locations? Assuming they came from 3 or 4 local governments, are there no coordinators there? You go and talk with them. That's how party ideology, that's how loyalty gets entrenched. So I'm not in support of the protest at all. It's a distraction. It's not going to lead to greater cohesion. It's also not a very good way of carrying out political education, because personal discretion is being allowed to stand forth as a point of view on the national platform. And so if, as some are protesting, let's take maybe the 4 front runners or the 5 cases in court or thereabouts. Each group, the president-elect, his team are protesting, the PDP protesting, Labour Party protesting, NPP, what would you have? So let's just conduct ourselves with some dignity. The riots to stop. The leaders of the parties should call them in. Adegoke said Dati Ahmed made a comment about the protest not ending. If he made that comment, I consider it unfortunate. Yeah. Discipline is part of leadership. The correct signaling is also important. And I don't think anybody should ask people
indeed,
to continue. Let's give the judiciary the respect it
instructive, Prof, and we hope that the relevant authorities will take heed to your admonition in that regard. You just talked about the judiciary. Let me take this to Mr. Adegoke. If you look at the last paragraph of that statement issued by the DSS, it says stakeholders, notably judicial authorities, media, and the civil society, are enjoined to be watchful and cautious to avoid being used as instruments to subvert peace and stability of the nation. Let's pick up on the judiciary first of all. Commentators have reminded us that during the June 12, 1993 election, that the judiciary was some sort of pawn to the extent that contrary ex parte orders were issued, one for the counting to be stopped and the other for the counting to be continued, and at the end of the day, the elections were annulled. So do you see that as a possibility if we consider this statement by the DSS?
Right. I have heard about the claim or the allegation that certain individuals or political parties are trying to move the courts to restrain the inauguration from being held. That would be an irresponsible order for any court to make. It's just like somebody getting an order from a court, or maybe let us say the executive today saying that no court in the land should sit anymore. How would the constitutionalism concepts or doctrine be protected? How are we going to be regarded as a responsible nation where the legislature, for instance, says that the executive should stop working from maybe a particular date or for a particular purpose? It is not sensible. It is the court of law that has the power truly to check other arms of government in terms of interpreting the Constitution. But transitioning from one particular government to another is not an issue on which the court will have the jurisdiction to grant an ex parte order to say, yes, somebody has been elected, then it should not be sworn in. The Constitution has guaranteed the rule, the right, the process to follow when a particular party or group of people feel somewhat, unhappy with the outcome of an election. It is possible that some people might approach maybe a court in Zungeru, in very remote, yes, we've seen lawyers and political actors, political leaders approaching courts in very remote areas and obtaining injunctive orders recklessly issued by some members of the bench. It is quite disheartening and quite disappointing that a judge will grant a political order, a political directive that he knows cannot even be enforced. How are we now going to guarantee that there wouldn't be a vacuum where a court says the inauguration should not hold on May 29? Are we saying that President Muhammadu Buhari will continue being president? Who is going to take over? Is it
so if it's a possibility then, Mr. Adegoke, how do we guard against it?
Yes, right now I believe that the NJC, the National Judicial Council, is taking, because meetings were recently held, and I believe that the NJC is taking the appropriate steps to make sure that their lordships in the various high courts and other courts are educated. I mean educated in terms of making them to be conscious, to be wary of such developments in their courts, where such applications are made, that you don't grant this kind of order no matter what. The appropriate thing to say to such parties is that go and put the other parties on notice. Bring your case for me to hear both sides, maybe on a particular day to be given thereafter. And where the issue of jurisdiction is thrown up, then you must be able to look into the Constitution and know that this is not the appropriate thing. More so that petitions are already pending before the various tribunals, where the Federal High Court says that a particular candidate who has been declared winner of an election should not be sworn in. And eventually the tribunal is hearing the same case. Is it not going to amount to conflicts between the two courts? It's not going to be an abuse of court process.
Indeed, and we hope that we do not.
I believe it is fundamental at this stage
We hope that we do not get into that quagmire. Yes. We hope that the judiciary would seriously guard against it. Let's take the third beat of the last paragraph of that statement, and I'm bringing this to you, Prof. The DSS also urges that civil society should be weary of becoming instruments to subvert the peace. And we've seen time and again how members of the civil society, gather together to protest against one form of issue or the other, particularly at the National Assembly. And you mentioned the Unity Fountain. We've seen that in this instance where there are some who are for the candidate who has emerged president-elect and those who are against. Should we begin to interrogate civil society and, perhaps separate the wheat from the chaff, those who are political jobbers and those who are, of legitimate causes?
Yeah, well, yes, but actually part of our problem revolves around the fact that some civil society organizations misread their legitimacy. You may recall that civil society organizations, quite a number of them, had very strong views about what's going on in the Northeast, about human rights and so many other things. I'm a bandit, I come with my team, I wipe out a village, men, women, and children. I keep moving from one place to another. And the issue on the table only for you is the human rights of the bandit. The soldier, you've trained a soldier, you spent as a brigadier, a colonel, the nation has invested X amount. This is high caliber human capital. He gets killed. It's not important. But bandits, armed robbers with no history and no future. So you see that civil society organizations, many of them are very responsible. If you look at the monitoring of elections consistently, and some interventions they are making, you can't remove the fact that they are a necessary part of our fabric for development. But the truth is that the concept of national interest is not understood by many of them. That's different from asking everybody to lie for your nation. Go to the US, information, civil society, management of public communications is always guided by national interest. That's why the CNN you and I watch is not the CNN you watch in the US if you go there. That's why you don't have shortwave radio, which can traverse so many areas. National interest communication, national interest intervention in social issues, national interest orientation and conflict resolution is something which, to my mind, and I may be mistaken, many, perhaps too many civil society organizations are remiss. In that case, they pick up information, they put it out. All they need to do, and this is what interests their sponsors, is to say that there's something wrong here, and for as long as it can happen. Okay, events began in Borno, and some of them who were renting 6 months, went and rent. Why would you pay rent for 10 years in a conflict area, except that you expect it to continue? So all of that. And then, of course, fake news comes into it. A moment ago, not quite 20 minutes ago, I referred to the boy who hung himself. Now, fact check, even while we're in the studio here, that's the beauty of technology. That information, I got it weeks back. Several people confirmed it. Channels has just done confirmed and referred a fact check with a link showing that it's fake news. But until that came now, I thought it was correct. And you find that challenge also with civil society organizations that have very little spread, but they are making very strong statements about places where they're actually not on ground. That's part of the problem.
Professor Kechuku, as we begin to wind down, I know that Malcolm might have one question to ask you, but you said something else earlier about cohesion amongst the youth. But before that, you talked about governance and the institutions of governance. How would that play out in all of these things you talked about, how the non-governmental organizations or civil society organizations even operate within our space? Mapa, you want to join that with your question?
Let's load the question. I want to quickly ask, because I'm just thinking of young people. A lot of them were also very disappointed by the process. A lot of them immediately lost faith. Let me just say also, maybe also lost patriotism as a result of what happened during the election. So I'm just wondering if it's something that is of concern to you and how it is that we can keep them interested in such a way that they realize that the work is also in their hands, to build a country and make it whatever it is that they choose to make it.
You see, that's where leadership comes in. And that's where, you see, the point to make here is that the young people need knowledge, not just information. And knowledge means understanding how the environment works. They are the ones in the line of fire. There's a lot that needs to happen in their interest. And so you find that the challenge cuts across cuts across three major platforms. Number one, who are those mentoring them? What are their reflexes? Many of them are disappointed, but they need to also understand that patriotism does not rest on you getting what you want. No. National interest. Now it's being subverted. You've gone for a particular candidate, he didn't work. You don't give up. You write an exam, you score a B, you write and you do better. So I keep insisting on progressive gains in political education despite the incompetence of the parties. What I see is the progressive upscaling of the consciousness of young people. They are likely to now be a little more patient, but they are seeing their future looking very bleak. And it's not by protesting. So subliminally, people are learning. The crisis I see on the table is where there are no leaders who will be able to tell them, yes, keep going in this direction, don't give up, etc. That way they begin to develop the kind of confidence all of us have with our parents when we're learning to walk. Mm-hmm. But also, and more critically, the youths need to make a distinction between biologically young people and youths. Some are biologically young, but they belong to the old brigade because they are the ones readily available for what is damaging this country. Once they use only biological age, their disadvantage will remain.
Well, let me quickly go to Mr. Adegoke now as we wrap up. I just want to ask you what language you also think the leadership should be speaking, because some people think that this DSS statement, yes, it is pretty strong, and if I mean, I don't think that they will just come out and say what what isn't true. But some people have also said they need proof to be able to take the DSS at his word. Do you think it's also something that needs to be provided to the Nigerian people, especially in a time where trust is becoming quite scarce? Mr. Adegoke, did you hear me?
It is, I believe, what is happening right now in terms of... There are no arrests. Yes, I heard you.
Please go ahead then.
I heard you. Can you hear me?
Please go ahead.
Yes, I think there is a network problem. Okay, right. Thank you very much. Now, the process is one that I believe that are to be handled with care. I don't want a situation where the DSS will see this as an opportunity to begin indiscriminate arrests and be bundling people into prisons and what have you. They have to handle this with a lot of maturity. We are already at a stage that we must handle the consciousness of the youth very carefully. Majority of them are ill-informed, just as Prof said. What kind of education do they have about the political process? And they are in the vanguard of the agitation. They are not necessarily in the majority with respect to how the election played out. Mm-hmm. I have had reasons to talk to quite a number of them. And my children, for instance, they were largely misinformed until I sat them down and I educated them. I now refer them to books in my library. I said, look, have you read this? Have you read this particular book? Have you read Awuhon, the Path to Nigerian Freedom and whatever? So I now refer them to a lot of books. I sat them down, educated them properly, and they were like, getting constructed with respect to some false beliefs that they had initially. They were now asking questions, but we never heard this. I said, yes, I've been mentioning it, but you people refuse to listen. You refuse to read these books. I've been directing you to the libraries. In those days when we were young, there were things we read that made us to be politically conscious. Yes, we organized protests, we organized rallies, we were on the streets, on so many occasions, but they were political interventions that were largely positive.
Mr. Adegoke, we're totally out of time. I wish that we could go on and on. Sadly, time is not our friend this morning. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I hope that the DSS has also listened to you in terms of handling their issues with political maturity. Thank you so much, Mr. Adegoke. He's a senior advocate of Nigeria and principal partner, Kunle Adegoke and Company. We also had with us here Professor Ikechukwu, who is Executive Director, Development Specs Academy. Prof, thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily as well. We'll take a moment right now and we'll be back shortly to consider just one more matter. Please stay with us.
part the ranking and they don't call me world best for no reason. I only deal with the best. Be it auto or business, 100% claim is always guaranteed.
Welcome to world-class insurance services. We are Anchor Insurance, where insurance truly works.
Ladies and gentlemen. What's this one?
You see, as it be now, they call me, but no be me show. That's how some business owners will have a different name on their business account from the actual business name. Listen, don't let your customers be suspicious of your business. Sign up with business account with Money Points and get an account in your business name in minutes.
Whatever it takes to make sure you have a business account opened in your business name, we'll do it as your sure banker. Open a bank account in your business name with Money Point.
Every prolific organization needs strategic leaders who can turn challenges to opportunities. And thus, Texam invites senior executives to our online executive development program, Strategic Leadership for Enduring Impact During Volatile Periods, to develop a high-performance culture and win. From April 15 to May 6, the 4-week masterclass aims to equip leaders and their organizations with critical core competence. The cost is 1,836,750 naira after discount. Featuring an eminent faculty which includes Oxford alumnus Professor Roger Delves, Professor Paul Griffith, and Professor Randall Peterson of London Business School. The focus is to help the participants understand how to better inspire the strategic deployment of limited resources more efficiently and effectively. For more information, email exec@texam.co.uk or visit texam.co.uk. Texam, insights that inspire actions that change the world. Back to Sunrise Daily, our closing moment here, or closing segment rather, and this time we're looking at a political matter. We're looking at the internal crisis or affairs of the People's Democratic Party, and to help us understand what's happening there, we have Akinloye Oyeni, who is a member of the People's Democratic Party and a legislative consultant. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, Nigerians.
So, real quick, what's going on? What's this, as I say, storm in the teacup in the People's Democratic Party?
What is going on? You know what is going on? Everybody knows what is actually going on. But the issue didn't start today. The issue actually started, I think, immediately after the presidential primaries. There are some group of people agitating that we have to flip the chairmanship back to the south because we are having the chairmanship from the north. Since we are now having the presidential candidate, excuse me, from the north, then the chairmanship must have. Well, we definitely have to go back to the south. But you know when these meetings started going to London, here the candidate himself, Elijah Tukabara, meeting with them and the rest. He said something, made a statement about the issue being a constitutional issue. Because you see in PDP, the NWC we are having now, before the last NWC, like the way it is done is that when you have, like we're having the chairman and other positions from the north, national secretary and others from the south, the next convention, those positions are going to be flipped. Those positions in the south will have to come to the north. Those in the north will have to go to the south. So in the case of those making agitation that only the chairmanship should be changed, there's no way the party can have national chairman of the party from the south and the national secretary from the south. There's no way. So that is where the issue, that is where the problem actually started from. So there's no way except the entire NWC will have to be disbanded.
And they couldn't have done an emergency convention to...
It's possible, but you know when you are negotiating between sides, if you are negotiating with me, if you are bringing that proposal, it now depends on me to accept your proposal, whether we should disband all, and we flip or we are not going to disband. We heard Governor Wike persistently saying, only Ayu should go, only Ayu should go. But that can be done.
Well, it didn't quite work out initially, at least before the elections. After the elections, we now saw another drama. The ward from where Mr. Ayu comes from, suspended him, and then, I'm trying to remember what eventually happened. Well, I think they also went to court. I mean, not that particular, not the ward, but there was also a case in court asking him to step down for him not to be recognized as a national chairman. So indeed, according to the PDP, they said they decided to respect the court order and, and asked him to, to step down. But before that time, there had been a number of issues which he had decisions which he had taken, or the NWC under his leadership had taken, which was to suspend a number of some leaders, within prominent leaders within the PDP, and also, ask for Governor Tom to face disciplinary panel. But shortly after he stepped down, then we saw a vote pass. Where the NWC now, under the leadership of Mr. Damagum, is now saying that those suspensions have been reversed. And I think Mr. Ayu is not also going to beg pardon. Governor Tom is also not going to be facing any disciplinary panel as well. So people are wondering, even though the actions were not instituted from, will I say the NWC, or will I say from within the leadership, of the PDP, it does appear that there's a different script that is in play right now. What exactly is happening in respect of that?
Actually, let me start from the suspension from the ward level. The way people who are actually playing that script they were trying to follow the APC, the way Oshomole was removed from. But PDP and the APC, they don't operate the same constitution. According to PDP constitution, you have to be the NEC. That's the NEC. That's the National Executive Committee that will have to deal with the NEC members, all NEC members, including suspension, whatever. Not ward level, not even state, not even zona.
Yeah, we understand the ward executive they have now been suspended.
When that happened, that was why the NWC then under Ayu said the chairman goes nowhere. But when the issue is now in court. And one thing about court is that whether a court order is, whether it is genuine, whether it is, not genuine, whether it is right or wrong, in as much as it is an order from court, you have to obey. You have to obey first, then until you vacate that particular order, or there's another superior order to that. You understand? That was, and PDP is a kind of political party that obeys court orders and constitutional authority. So when the court order came, there's nothing to be done apart from obeying the court order, and that was done. And then the deputy from the north, Damagu, took over in acting capacity. And when he came, we now have a new NWC, because we have Ayu led now. We now have Damagum led NWC rather. So now, and it's like you said, those positions were taken by the NWC under Ayu, that the suspension and the invitation of Governor Otom to face the disciplinary committee. Then when Damagu came on board, those things were thrown away. And we can't. I'm not a member of NWC. I wasn't in the meeting. I don't know how they arrived at that. But I think that position, the throwing away of those suspensions, I think in a way will help the party. And in another way, we present the party as a weak party. When you take the decision, I think that you have to be firm with your decision, because those decisions were taken because some people actually worked against the party, and they were even saying it outside. They were not even hiding it. They said, you actually have facts. The party is in command of so many facts concerning that, and they took that decision. I don't know the facts they are now having to reverse those decisions. These people come on TV, to radio, and even openly social media to say they are happy. They were happy to have worked against the party, giving victory of the party to another party.
This whole thing that's happening, if you could just answer this real quick. Some will say it's when you see smoke, it's a product of embers that have been smoldering for a long time. Yes. So were there issues in the party long before even the presidential primaries that maybe were not looked at critically, or we're just riding over them?
Yeah, there were issues of zoning. First, before the national convention, we have a Ungwani committee that zoned the party positions, some to the south, some to the north. Then we now had Governor Tom's committee again on zoning of elective positions. You know, see, when people are talking of this G5 and the rest and the other equity group or integrity group, whatever, Governor Tom himself was the chairman of the committee. What stopped? Nothing stops him from zoning his committee zoning the presidential ticket to the south. But it was it was thrown out. When you throw something out like that, when you throw it open, that is to say any member of the party that has purchased the form can get the position. So when Elijah Atiku Abubakar got the position, so I don't see where we should be having wrangling and all these things should be coming from. The positions should have been actually outrightly been should have been zoned before, but it was not zoned by Autumn's committee.
You know what some people are also saying? Mr. Damagum was a part of the NWC when Mr. Ayu led it as a deputy national chairman North. So I am wondering, some people will say that perhaps, would you say that the decisions that were taken under his leadership were not popular at the time?
I won't say that. I won't say. You know, I've been a member of a committee before. I've served at the party level and other outside party. You know, when you are in a meeting, majority will always carry the vote, except when you want to force them. When you want to force your decision as the chairman on the committee, you can. When you see that your decision is not being taken, you can call for a break. By the time when they go for a break, you announce from there. You not even come back to the committee, but that will still cause another rancor. But you understand me now. I wouldn't say his decision wasn't popular. It depends on the majority of those people who voted then. Then depending on the majority of people who voted under Damagum, we shouldn't overlook the issue that we have two scenarios. When Ayu was taking those decisions, he has not been suspended. There was no court order. But under Damagum, there was suspension, and we have court order in place. So those data, those facts will have kind of shifted people's support to the proposal from what the stand they took under Ayu to another stand they took under Damagum. How do you see the PDP moving forward? Because it does appear that the idea behind this is reconciliation. Yes. Do you think that members, warring members within the party can still be reconciled, or do you think it's beyond repair? Yes. Well, we can still be reconciled. You know why I say we can still be reconciled? Because some of us were not aggrieved. There were some people who were aggrieved before. And I think what they were agitating for is gradually coming to place. They now say those people who work against the party and we that work for the party, we should just collaborate everything together, we should be one. But there are some of us who were I won't say attacked physically, who were attacked, but not physical attack, because we stood our ground that we are going to work for the party. You understand me? No, actually, there are some of us that we don't have. It's not as if we have all our expectations met. But party position is supreme. We have to go with the party. You understand? But there are some people now who, like, we are in the same party. You and I, we are in the same party, and we're supposed to work for the same time. You are working against me openly like this on the election day, and the next day, or let's say a week later, or a month later, they now say, whatever I have done, whatever you have done, we should overlook them. We should come back together again. It will not be easy, right? It will not be easy. Now, some of us now we are now aggrieved. We are the aggrieved now. We are the obedient. We obey the party directive. We are now aggrieved. But what I will tell both people who are aggrieved before, like we have been telling them, we are aggrieved now. We still, because we are from the same family. If the way it happened to us when those people were aggrieved that we couldn't move forward. You cannot be running and you are dragging loads. You understand me now? Some of us we have to now try as much as possible to cheat our own swords and try to have large heart. They have done what they want to do. We have done what we want to do. God has rewarded us where He will reward us. Where we cannot have result. We are not. That's how I think faith. What faith threw at us. We should just allow everything to go. We should allow bygone to be bygone, that we can move forward and have a successful and effective party. Opposition party, or if we can come through judiciary, if you can come on board, so be it.
Mr. Oyeni, thank you so much. Mr. Akinloye Oyeni is a member of the People's Democratic Party and the Legislative Consultant. Thank you. Let's hope that your party will get to resolve its issues and move on. By the grace of God. Let peace reign. Thank you so much. And that is the show today. Thank you so much for letting us be a part of your morning. Go there, have yourself a beautiful rest of the day.
Thank you so much for watching. Now, Maokwe Ogun Yusuf.
Thank you for watching. I am Bukola Koka. Have yourselves a wonderful weekend.
All right. Well, the weekend starts now, so it's okay. You can relax, stretch your legs. And I hope that you're liquid this weekend. Yeah. And if it's illiquid you're doing, hey, all well and good. Goodbye. I'm Kairi Okikilu.
It's engaging, fascinating, and insightful. Join us as we connect with the global community of Nigerians around the world. We talk about life in the diaspora, flying the Nigerian flag, their culture, socio-political activities, and stories on Channels Television.
Britain is quite a racist country, and where they see asylum seekers on the street and they have a very poor opinion of them.
Diaspora Network, engaging diasporans for development.
Like drops of rain, individuals and groups innovate, birthing ideas that might make the difference in the conversations and action to fight climate change and the negative impact of man's activities. Innovative thinking from Africa and Europe to save our planet, to light up our cities without tearing apart the ozone, making progress safe and sustainable. On Eco Africa, we highlight the efforts to live and grow sustainably at these times on Channels Television.
Hello and welcome to our special coverage of Russian invasion. I'm Olumide Macaulay. The headlines. State Department urges U.S. citizens to leave Russia immediately after Wall Street Journal reporter's arrest. Spokeswoman of Russia's foreign ministry, Maria Zakharova, says activities of arrested U.S. reporter not related to journalism. Plus, Austrian lawmakers criticize walkout of far-right freedom party during Zelensky's speech. Thank you for joining us this morning. The U.S. State Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel has urged citizens residing or traveling in Russia to leave immediately amidst the arrest of an American reporter accused of espionage, the most serious move against a foreign journalist since Russia invaded Ukraine. It comes after a Moscow court ruled the U.S. national and journalist for the Wall Street Journal, Ivan Gershkovich, should be detained for nearly 2 months on suspicion of spying.
Especially in this room, I know all of you are incredibly concerned about the reports coming out of Russia today, as am I, as is the entire department. I want to say clearly and unequivocally in the strongest terms, we condemn the Kremlin's continued attempts to intimidate, repress, and punish journalists and civil society voices. Unfortunately, we have seen how the Russian government's escalating repression affects journalists as well as civil society activists and the broader Russian community. Since February 24th, 2022, dozens of outlets and more than 100 individual media professionals have been labeled as undesirable organizations or foreign agents for doing their jobs.
That the United States should not use this as, in their view, a pretext to do anything to Russian media.
Due to privacy considerations, I am limited at what I can share, but here are some updates I can offer. First, the U.S. Embassy in Moscow has requested official notification of the arrest, and Russia is required to provide that under our bilateral consular convention. Second, whenever U.S. citizens are arrested abroad, we pursue consular access as soon as possible. However, due to Russia's administrative procedures and security requirements, it will likely be several days before that happens. Third, we are in close contact with the Wall Street Journal on this issue. And also, I would like to make it clear that it is not safe for U.S. citizens to be in the Russian Federation. Any U.S. citizen residing or traveling in Russia should depart immediately, as stated in our latest travel advisory. Those who require assistance in departing Russia should contact the U.S. Embassy in Moscow for assistance.
Well, so on that, can you give us any more detail about it?
And we have not yet heard back from the Russian Foreign Ministry Affairs, but we reached out through the appropriate channels as soon as we were made aware of this reporting.
Evan was an accredited journalist there. Are you saying it's not safe for even people who are accredited, with the ministry or working for international organizations?
Our message to American citizens residing in Russia is that the travel advisory warning is a level 4 and that they should leave.
It looks like they already drew that line that he has been doing something illegal.
It is not helpful for anybody to get into hypotheticals right now, but there's also no reason that anyone should believe these charges as accurate. But currently, our priority is gaining consular access to this individual, which is something we would do in any circumstance when an American national is detained abroad in any part of the world.
Are you concerned about the impact this could have on Paul Whelan's case? And do you have any updates on when he was last given consular visitor a call?
So I think it's really important, Jenny, that we not make comparisons among these cases. The U.S. government continues to engage with the Russian Federation through the established channel to bring Paul Whelan home. His release continues to be an absolute priority, and we have and will continue to engage the Russian government on his case. Consular officers last visited Paul in person at the end of January, and will be speaking to him by phone today.
U.S. State Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel taking questions from journalists on the Gershkovich arrest in Russia. Speaking of which, the man in question, 31-year-old Ivan Gershkovich, who's worked in Russia as a journalist for 6 years, is the highest profile American arrested there since basketball star Brittany Griner, who was freed in December after 10 months in jail on drugs charges. The Federal Security Service said it arrested Gershkovich in the Urals industrial city of Yekaterinburg. He was brought to Moscow, where a court at the closed hearing ordered him held in a pretrial detention until May the 29th. Daniil Berman, a lawyer representing the reporter, said Russian court held quick closed hearing for Gershkovich and was not permitted inside the courtroom or allowed to see the charges. According to the TASS state news agency, he pleaded not guilty. In the meantime, the White House dismissed espionage charges against the Wall Street Journal reporter detained by Russia as ridiculous. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said there was no reason to believe the charges are accurate.
Especially in this room, I know all of you are incredibly concerned about the reports coming out of Russia today, as am I, as is the entire department. I want to say clearly and unequivocally in the strongest terms, we condemn the Kremlin's continued attempts to intimidate, repress, and punish journalists and civil society voices.
Last night, senior White House officials spoke directly with Mr. Gershkovich's employer, the Wall Street Journal. The State Department has also been in touch with the Wall Street Journal and his family on this matter. These espionage charges are ridiculous. The targeting of American citizens by Russian government is unacceptable. We condemn the detention of Mr. Gershkovich in the strongest terms. So look, we don't have any specific indication that journalists would be targeted. As we know, this is incredibly, sadly common for Russia to detain Americans, and that's why we've been very clear about Americans not going to Russia. It is not safe, and we have been very clear. There's no reason to believe that those charges are accurate. The espionage are accurate. I don't want to speak beyond that, and certainly we will have more information when we get it. There are privacy concerns, so we just want to be very mindful on how we speak about this. So look, detaining Americans, as my colleague said, my NSC colleague said, is a tactic Russia has used for a long time. It is nothing new. When you think about Paul Whelan, you think about Trevor Reed, they were taken prior to the prior administration, under the prior administration.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said the public would have an opportunity to verify Moscow's claim that a U.S. reporter detained on espionage charges we've been reporting had been engaged in activities unrelated to journalism. Espionage under Russian law can be punishable by up to 20 years in jail.
Соответствующие заявления были сделаны по линии
Under the cover of journalist activity with a press visa and accreditation, this person, judging by the actions undertaken by him and in relation to him, has been involved in a completely different kind of activity. I'm now reading a lot of reports in the Western media saying that he had accreditation from the Foreign Ministry, therefore he's a journalist. No, no, no. This is what he claimed to be. But what he has been doing in Yekaterinburg was not journalism. I do not know if there are any other cases, but the allegations made by our intelligence services today were not related to his journalism. They are related to non-journalistic activity.
совершенно иной деятельностью.
Yaroslav Shirshikov, a political expert in Yekaterinburg, said he was interviewed by Gershkovich 2 weeks ago and was due to meet him again. Shirshikov said Gershkovich had not said anything about wanting information about a military factory and was not an enemy of Russia.
Он со мной связался, попросил высказаться на тему отношения гражданского общества к Пригожину в Екатеринбурге. То есть, по его словам, это был главный момент его исследования. Мы встретились с ним, я пригласил к себе в офис, в институт к себе. Мы общались, я его знакомил с некоторыми людьми, тоже, как говорится, у которых он брал комментарии. Вот. Гуляли по городу, я небольшую экскурсию провел. Потом, значит, Эван с фотографом улетели в Москву, а буквально во вторник, то есть позавчера, получается, он мне написал: сможем встретиться в четверг? Я: так, конечно, сможем. Вот, такие дела. Уже сегодня в час ночи, получается. Только я спать лег вчера и уснул, и раздался телефонный звонок.
Away from the Gershkovich arrest, the White House urged Russia to conduct itself professionally when it assumes its scheduled UN Security Council presidency next month, saying there was no means to block Moscow from the post. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre told a news briefing that the U.S. also expects Russia to continue to use its seat on the council to spread disinformation and justify its actions in Ukraine. Jean-Pierre explained the Security Council's presidency is a position that rotates the council members each month in alphabetical order, and there isn't a feasible international legal pathway to change that reality. Lawmakers at the Austrian parliament strongly criticized members of the pro-Russia far-right Freedom Party as they walked out of the lower house of Austria's parliament during a speech by Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky protesting that it violates Austria's neutrality. President Zelensky, addressing the chamber via video link, thanking Russia for its humanitarian aid and help with projects such as clearing landmines. As part of his speech, Austria says its neutrality prevents it from military involvement in the conflict. And while it supports Ukraine politically, it cannot send the country weapons in its fight against the Russian invasion. We'll show you the movement from lawmakers from the pro-Russia far-right Freedom Party who walked out of the lower house of the Austrian parliament. And there you have it, them walking out. The Freedom Party had warned, however, days before that it would hold some form of protest against President Zelensky's address. And that's the form it took. Its lawmakers attended the start of the speech and then they left. Lawmakers who walked out of the chamber left small placards on their desks featuring their party logo and either space for neutrality or space for peace. Of the 5 parties in the parliament, the FPO has the 3rd biggest number of seats in the lower house. It currently has a slight lead in opinion polls over the opposition Social Democrats and the Chancellor Karl Nehammer's Conservatives, who govern in coalition with the left-wing Greens. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky marked 400 days of war, thanking the people of Ukraine for the collective struggle. Speaking during his daily evening address, President Zelensky expressed a thought for anyone who supported the country and helped since the Russian invasion started in February 2022. In the same address, he also thanked the Austrian parliament, as we reported earlier, for their support towards Ukraine. Taiwan's relationship with the United States has never been closer. That's according to its president, Tsai Ing-wen, after arriving in New York City on Wednesday, as Beijing warned her visit could lead to serious confrontation between China and the U.S. A banquet with members of the Taiwanese American community. At that banquet, Tsai said Taiwan faced tremendous challenges. In her words, we know that we are stronger when we stand together in solidarity with fellow democracies. Taiwan cannot be isolated, and we do not take friendship for granted. Tsai's visit comes at a time of heightened tension between U.S. and China and has sparked already sharp condemnation from Beijing, which claims democratic Taiwan as its territory despite never having controlled it. King Charles III and his wife, Queen Consort Camilla, have visited a weekly outdoor market in Berlin on their 2nd day of the King's first state visit abroad since becoming British monarch. At the market, the royals got a chance to taste organic products from the Brandenburg region, including cheese, meat, and honey. A big crowd of people gathered there to greet King Charles and Camilla, who then took time to chat and take pictures with some of them. Over a 3-day visit to Berlin, Brandenburg in the east and the northern port city of Hamburg, King Charles will attend engagements reflecting issues facing both countries, such as environmental sustainability and the Ukraine crisis, and will also commemorate the past. Now we're pleased to talk to Mr. Chidi Wanu, a security expert joining us from out of London. Good morning and you're welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Let's begin with the Gershkovich arrest. In the days of the KGB, some have called it the KG used to be because it's defunct, obviously, and has transformed to the FSB. Spies, and during the Cold War, took a more ominous connotation, and spying. You had the spy, the traditional spy. You had the double agents, the treacherous double agent. Then you had the very treacherous triple agents when that happened. But now it appears that this war also has a dimension of spying involved in it. Are these accusations, do they have any merit at all, in your view?
I would say in this particular case, without any of us knowing the specifics of the case, I would say with maybe 70% certainty that this is not really an espionage case. It's almost, again, with 70% certainty, almost definitely, political bargaining. He's most likely been set up, most likely been offered something which he wouldn't have known was of, or covered as a military secret in Russia. And then, being captured on that basis. This is, it's not something new. It's something that, the Soviet Union and the Russians have done quite, repeatedly. And not just, the Soviet Union and Russia, many other countries, including, Western powers, use this method to, entrap people who they believe to be espionage agents. But in this case, I do not believe the Russians think he's an espionage agent. Again, unless something that we don't know about is revealed. It's most likely he's been captured as a pawn, as some way to, again, put pressure on the Americans and the Western powers.
We'll think that the Wall Street Journal will also be more careful in sending out their reporters in cases such as this, knowing that there's tension between the U.S. and Russia, and here he is in the heart of the country doing his job. He has accreditation to do it, but what did he expect? We know that relationship is frosty between both countries.
Well, see, this is the interesting thing in that most, there is a certain, if you would say, gentleman's agreement that people will understand that, journalists are generally off limits as long as they stay within certain parameters. Again, journalists are a perfect cover for lots of spies, but in this case, he's a journalist for a fairly major, news organization. So it's unlikely that he would be a spy. So somebody like that has too high a profile to be, to work effectively as an intelligence agent. And any, diplomat or, spy, as it were, working in Russia, is automatically, or foreign, correspondent is automatically on the in the crosshairs of the FSB. So it's very unlikely. I mean, as I said, nothing is ever impossible. You could find something out later on, but it's very unlikely that he was actually a spy. What you're seeing here is Russia escalating, again, in the one realm that it does have escalatory power. It no longer is able to escalate on the battlefield because it no longer has that capability. Its forces, no longer have the ability to conduct major offensives, capture territory the same way it did earlier in the year. Its strategic air campaign against Ukrainian infrastructure hasn't worked. Its nuclear threats haven't worked. So Russia is now in the position where it has to find somewhere to escalate that, where it can, have some sort of an effect on the West. And the only way it can do it is this kind of hostage diplomacy. So by taking him prisoner, he'll definitely be convicted. And in some, in a few years, most likely he'll be exchanged for somebody else or released as a sign of goodwill. But this is, I wouldn't consider this to be an espionage situation. I think it's purely, about brinkmanship and trying to reestablish escalation dominance.
Yes, you make a very good point of it being too obvious, as it were. Spying is a very covert operation, and it's something that is very high-level espionage. So it'll be too predictable for such a high-profile, such an obvious reporter to be doing such a thing. But let's look at the Austrian walkout now of the supporters of the Freedom Party that walked out in the lower house of Austria's parliament. They say neutrality is the order of the day and that should be respected. They have a point, no?
Yes, they do have a point in that Austria is technically neutral in its constitution and its international affairs. So from a purely legal and you could even argue, kind of geopolitical point of view, they're correct. Austria's neutrality should be respected, but there's no, the only way you could say, there's no way you can say hosting Zelensky is violating Austria's neutrality. Austria isn't supplying weapons, or Austria isn't, providing lethal military equipment. So they're still maintaining their neutrality, as it were, and they're even preventing, the dispatch of Austrian equipment that's been made, by Austrians sold to other countries. So they're maintaining their neutrality. A presentation to Parliament isn't a violation of that per se. It might not be within the very, narrow confines of neutrality, but we obviously, everybody sees this for what it is. It's a party that is broadly pro-Putin, pro-Russia, anti what you would consider to be the establishment West. Making a point. This is a great opportunity for them to raise their profile, and it's a good opportunity for Russia. This will be heavily messaged on Russian social media and traditional media channels as divisions in Europe. Austria not being the Austrian government, not being supported by some people. It's a stunt, it's propaganda, but, it's based on a genuine principle of neutrality.
Mr. Wanu, do you think, therefore, we're coming to a watershed moment in international diplomacy where countries who stay in the middle and sit on the fence concerning support for the war militarily or in more tangible ways are seen as supporting Russian aggression?
I think that, to be brutally honest, I think that moment has actually passed, because when we've seen at the beginning of the war, especially countries like India, countries like not necessarily China, but countries like India, South Africa, who refused to condemn the war, and in the case of South Africa and India, have still maintained their close relations with Russia. They were accused quite liberally of being pro-Russian, and all of this statements, but that hasn't deterred them. The South Africans have just conducted an exercise with the Russians. They still hosted Russian officials. I think that point has passed. I think the world has settled quite clearly into its camps. You've got the overtly pro-Russian camp, Iran, Syria, those North Korea, those few isolated nations. You've got the heavily or the pro-Russian neutrals like China, India, South Africa, and then you've got everybody else who just wants to mind their business and get along with it, get along with life, just sitting there off into the corner. I don't think you're going to find much change in either position. Many of these countries have made these decisions not from emotional perspectives or from, except maybe South Africa, or from any other kind of perspective. It's purely from a transactional state of mind. India depends on Russia for a huge amount of its weaponry. They've got lots of joint ventures in terms of weapons manufacture. And they're also, because of the sanctions, they're getting very, very cheap oil from Russia by buying it, in their own currency and buying it at a massive discount. So it's very much in their strategic interest to continue, supporting Russia. China, benefits from, Russia being in a conflict with the West. China and Russia are rivals, whether, they're currently, at each other's throat now then or not. They are rivals, they're neighbors. There's been tension between those countries for centuries. So for Russia to be, wasting all this military strength, in a war in Ukraine, it's great for China. For Russia to be, holding the West's attention and, demonstrating to China how the West would most likely react to an invasion of Taiwan is great for China. But at the same time, the effect on the world economy is bad for China. So they have a strategic interest in balancing all of these competing these competing effects. And then I would say for South Africa, that their involvement in BRICS is a key kind of driver for their policy, but also, their history of Soviet support for the anti-apartheid struggle makes them loath to oppose Russia, and also their opposition to the U.S. interventions in Libya, in Iraq. That was standard South African foreign policy, and their predictions proved to be right. So from their perspective, they were on the right side of history then. They're most likely on the right side of history now. So there is, as I said, while there's an emotional element, there was also a practical element to it.
A thin line, therefore, between neutrality and acquiescence. Thank you for your contributions to the program this morning. Mr. Chidi Iwanu speaking to us from out of London, a security expert.
Thanks for having me.
After the break, Finns welcome safety of potential NATO membership as Turkey approves Finland's application, clearing the last hurdle. Details in a moment. Please stay with us. From the north to the south, east and west, Network Africa brings you news stories from all around the continent. With wide range in coverage, insights and analysis of special issues, we dissect Africa in its beauty and peculiarities. Network Africa tells the African story from the African perspective. Network Africa, weekdays at 4 p.m.
Like drops of rain, individuals and groups innovate, birthing ideas that might make the difference in the conversations, and action to fight climate change and the negative impact of man's activities. Innovative thinking from Africa and Europe to save our planet, to light up our cities without tearing apart the ozone, making progress safe and sustainable. On Eco Africa, we highlight the efforts to live and grow sustainably at these times on Channels Television.
Thank you for staying with us and welcome back. Local authorities report one man has been killed and a woman wounded by Russian